What if the discomfort you feel in quiet moments is not caused by being alone, but by not feeling at ease within yourself? Many people try to fill their time with noise, connection, and constant distraction. Yet the moment everything slows down, a sense of emptiness quietly appears. It is not the absence of others that creates this feeling, but the lack of familiarity with your own inner world. In Buddhism, solitude is not something to avoid, it is something to understand. When you learn how to sit with your own presence without resistance, something begins to change. The mind stops searching, the restlessness begins to soften, and a different kind of peace becomes possible. You will explore how to transform the experience of being alone into something steady, clear, and deeply grounding, so that your peace no longer depends on who is around you, but on how you relate to yourself. Lesson 1. Stop labeling aloneness as loneliness. The discomfort you feel when you are alone does not come from the moment itself. It comes from the meaning your mind gives to it. The moment you are by yourself, the mind quickly places a label on the experience. It says, "This is loneliness." And once that label is accepted, the feeling begins to take shape around it. Much suffering begins not from what is happening, but from how the mind interprets it. A single moment can be experienced in many ways, but the label you attach to it determines how it feels. When aloneness is labeled as loneliness, the mind immediately connects it with absence, lack, and something being missing. This creates a sense of heaviness, even if nothing is actually wrong at that moment. But being alone and feeling lonely are not the same. Being alone is a simple condition. It means there are no people around you. It is neutral by nature. It does not carry pain or discomfort on its own. Loneliness, however, is an emotional state created by the mind. It is the feeling of disconnection, the belief that something is lacking, and the resistance to being with yourself. The mind has been conditioned to avoid aloneness. It is used to constant stimulation, conversations, messages, noise, and activity. When all of that is removed, it does not know how to rest. Instead of seeing the moment as an opportunity for stillness, it interprets it as emptiness. This interpretation creates discomfort, and that discomfort is then labeled as loneliness. When you stop labeling aloneness as loneliness, something begins to shift. The moment remains the same, but your relationship to it changes. Instead of immediately reacting, you begin to observe. You notice the quiet, the stillness, and the absence of external noise. At first, this may feel unfamiliar because the mind is not used to resting without distraction. But if you stay with the moment without adding a label, you begin to see that there is nothing inherently wrong with it. The discomfort starts to lose its intensity because it is no longer being reinforced by the idea that something is missing. You begin to experience aloneness as it truly is, simple, open, and free from pressure. This does not mean that the feeling of loneliness will disappear instantly. The mind may still bring up thoughts, memories, or emotions that create a sense of disconnection. But instead of identifying with them, you begin to see them as passing experiences. They arise, stay for a moment, and then move on. Just like any other thought or feeling, you create space between yourself and the label. You are no longer saying, "I am lonely." You are recognizing there is a feeling present. This small shift reduces the weight of the experience. It becomes something you can observe rather than something that defines you. As this understanding deepens, you begin to feel less resistance toward being alone. The need to constantly fill every moment starts to fade. You no longer rush to escape silence or seek distraction immediately. Instead, you allow the moment to exist as it is, without trying to change it. There is also a quiet clarity that appears in this state. When the mind is not occupied with labeling and reacting, it becomes more aware. You notice your thoughts more clearly, You understand your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This awareness creates a sense of connection, not with something outside, but with your own presence. This practice can begin in simple moments. When you find yourself alone, notice the first thought that arises. Notice how quickly the mind tries to define the experience. Instead of following that thought, pause and remain with the moment as it is. Let go of the need to call it something. Just experience it directly. This changes how you relate to solitude. What once felt uncomfortable begins to feel neutral, and eventually, it may even feel peaceful. The mind learns that it does not need constant external input to feel stable. It becomes more at ease with itself. A mind that labels aloneness as loneliness creates unnecessary suffering. But a mind that sees aloneness clearly, without adding meaning to it, becomes free. It is no longer disturbed by the absence of others, because it is not relying on them to feel complete. The shift is simple but powerful. You are not removing the experience of being alone, you are removing the interpretation that makes it heavy. And when that interpretation fades, what remains is a quiet space where your mind can rest, without pressure, without lack, and without the need to escape. You begin to realize that being alone is not something to fear, it is something to understand. Lesson 2. Create inner companionship. The feeling of loneliness often comes from a quiet disconnection within. Even when you are surrounded by people, if your relationship with your own mind is distant or uncomfortable, a sense of emptiness can still appear. This is why an external company does not always remove loneliness. The deeper need is not only for others, it is for a sense of connection within yourself. In Buddhism, the mind is seen as something you can learn to understand, observe, and be present with. When this relationship is missing, the mind feels unfamiliar, almost like a place you do not want to stay for too long. You seek distraction, conversation, or activity to avoid being alone with your own thoughts. But when you begin to build inner companionship, this changes. Inner companionship means learning to be with yourself without resistance. It is the ability to sit with your thoughts, your emotions, and your presence without needing to escape. Instead of seeing your inner world as something uncomfortable, you begin to see it as something you can gently observe and understand. This may feel unfamiliar. The mind is used to looking outward for connection, so when you turn inward, it may feel empty or quiet in a way that is not yet comfortable. But this is not a problem, it is simply a space that has not been explored with awareness. When you begin to observe your thoughts without judgment, you start to notice patterns. You see how certain thoughts repeat, how emotions rise and fall, and how your mind moves from one idea to another. Instead of reacting to these movements, you remain present with them. This creates a sense of connection because you are no longer avoiding what is happening within you. Inner companionship also means treating your own experience with understanding. When difficult thoughts or emotions appear, instead of pushing them away, you allow them to be there. You acknowledge them without adding resistance. This does not mean agreeing with everything you think or feel. It means recognizing that these experiences are part of the mind's natural movement. As you practice this, something begins to shift. The inner space that once felt uncomfortable becomes more familiar. The need to constantly escape through distraction starts to reduce. You begin to feel more at ease, even when nothing external is happening. There is also a sense of steadiness that develops. When you are comfortable with your own presence, you are not dependent on others to feel complete. This does not remove the value of connection with others, but it changes the way you relate to it. You connect from a place of balance, not from a need to fill something missing. This can be practiced in simple ways. Spend a few moments without external input. Sit quietly and notice your breath, your thoughts, and your surroundings. Instead of trying to change anything, simply observe. When the mind begins to wander or feel restless, Bring your attention back gently. You can also notice how you speak to yourself internally. The way you relate to your own thoughts creates your inner environment. When you approach your mind with patience and awareness, it becomes a place where you can stay without discomfort. This builds a sense of familiarity. Your inner world is no longer something you avoid. It becomes a space where you can rest, reflect, and understand yourself more clearly. This reduces the feeling of loneliness because you are no longer disconnected from your own presence. It is important to understand that inner companionship does not mean isolating yourself from others. It means that your sense of connection does not depend entirely on them. You can be alone without feeling empty, because you are present with yourself. A mind that avoids itself will always feel restless when alone, but a mind that learns to stay with itself becomes calm and grounded. It no longer needs constant stimulation to feel stable. Creating inner companionship is about building a quiet connection with your own awareness. It is about learning to be with yourself in a way that feels natural and steady. And as this connection grows, the feeling of loneliness begins to fade, not because others are always present, but because you are no longer absent from yourself. You begin to discover a kind of peace that does not depend on anything outside you, a peace that remains even in moments of complete solitude. Lesson 3. Stop seeking constant validation. A quiet source of loneliness often comes from the need to be seen, approved, and confirmed by others. The mind looks outward and asks, "Am I doing this right? Am I enough? Do I belong?" When answers seem uncertain, a subtle unease appears. Even when approval is given, it fades quickly, and the mind begins to seek it again. This creates a cycle where your sense of worth depends on something that is always changing. In Buddhism, suffering grows when the mind attaches itself to what is unstable. The opinions of others are not fixed. They shift with mood, perspective, and circumstance. When you rely on them to feel secure, your inner state becomes unsteady. One moment you feel accepted, the next moment doubtful. This constant movement prevents the mind from settling. Seeking validation is often learned over time. You notice that approval brings comfort and disapproval brings discomfort. Gradually, the mind begins to adjust its behavior to maintain that comfort. You shape your words, your actions, and even your identity around how you think you will be received. This may reduce discomfort in the moment, but it creates a deeper distance from your own understanding. When your attention is focused on being validated, you are not fully present with your own experience. You begin to measure yourself through the eyes of others. This creates a subtle tension because you are always checking, comparing, and adjusting. Even in moments of quiet, the mind continues this movement, searching for confirmation. Letting go of constant validation does not mean ignoring others or becoming closed. It means recognizing that your sense of stability cannot depend on external approval. You begin to see that no amount of validation will feel complete if your connection with yourself is unclear. The need will return again and again because it is not being resolved at its source. The shift begins with awareness. Notice how often your mind looks outward for confirmation. Notice the thoughts that arise when you are uncertain about yourself. Instead of immediately seeking reassurance, pause and observe these thoughts. See them as movements of the mind, not as facts that must be acted upon. As you do this, you begin to turn your attention inward. You start to rely more on your own understanding. When you make a decision, you allow it to stand without needing constant approval. When you express yourself, you do so with clarity, not with the need to be accepted by everyone. This creates a sense of quiet confidence, not a confidence based on proving yourself, but one based on being at ease with your own direction. You are no longer waiting for others to confirm your worth, because you are no longer measuring it in the same way. There is also a sense of freedom that appears. When you are not constantly seeking validation, your actions become more natural. You are not adjusting yourself to fit expectations. You are responding from awareness rather than from the need to be approved. This reduces internal pressure and allows your mind to become calmer. This can be practiced in small moments. When you feel the urge to seek reassurance, notice it without acting on it immediately. Give yourself a moment to sit with the uncertainty. Over time, you will see that the need for validation rises and falls on its own, just like any other thought or feeling. It is also helpful to understand that validation from others is not inherently wrong. It can be supportive and meaningful. But when it becomes a constant need, it creates dependency. By reducing this dependency, you allow your inner state to become more stable. A mind that depends on external validation will always feel unsettled. But a mind that learns to rest in its own understanding becomes steady. It does not require constant confirmation because it is not searching for something outside to complete it. Stopping the search for constant validation is not about rejecting others. It is about returning to yourself. It is about recognizing that your sense of worth and clarity cannot be built from changing opinions. And as this understanding deepens, the need to constantly seek approval begins to fade. What remains is a quieter, more grounded presence, one that is not easily shaken because it is no longer dependent on what others think. Loneliness begins to lose its hold because you are no longer looking outward to feel complete. You are already present within yourself. Lesson 4. Let your mind settle without distraction. The mind has become deeply accustomed to constant stimulation. It moves from one input to another, sounds, conversations, screens, thoughts without pause. Even in moments of quiet, it quickly creates something to focus on. This habit makes stillness feel unfamiliar and sometimes even uncomfortable. When there is nothing to engage with, the mind begins to feel unsettled, as if something is missing. Because of this, many people avoid quiet moments. They fill their time with activity, not always because it is necessary, but because it prevents them from being alone with their own mind. Distraction becomes a way to escape restlessness. It offers temporary relief, but it also prevents the mind from learning how to settle on its own. In Buddhism, the mind is not meant to be constantly occupied. It is meant to return to a natural state of clarity and calm. But this state cannot appear when the mind is always being stimulated. It requires space. It requires moments where nothing new is being added and where attention is not being pulled in different directions. Letting your mind settle without distraction means allowing these moments to exist without immediately trying to fill them. It means sitting with your experience as it is, without reaching for something to change it. At first, this can feel unfamiliar. The mind may become restless. Thoughts may increase. You may feel the urge to check something, to move, or to do anything that breaks the stillness. This reaction is not a problem. It is simply the mind revealing its habits. When it is no longer given constant stimulation, it shows how dependent it has become on it. Instead of resisting this, you begin to observe it. You notice the restlessness without acting on it. You allow the thoughts to come and go without following them. As you remain present, something begins to shift. The intensity of the restlessness starts to reduce. The thoughts become less urgent. The mind slowly begins to settle, not because you forced it to, but because you stopped feeding its constant need for distraction. This settling is not something dramatic, it is subtle. The mind becomes quieter. The space between thoughts becomes wider. There is less pressure to think, to react, or to engage with everything that appears. You begin to feel a sense of ease that does not depend on external input. This is important because much of the feeling of loneliness is connected to the inability to stay with your own mind. When the mind cannot settle, it feels empty without stimulation. But when it learns to rest, That same space no longer feels empty, it feels calm. This can be practiced in simple ways. Allow short periods where you are not consuming information or engaging with distractions. Sit quietly, walk without input, or simply observe your surroundings. When the mind tries to move away, gently bring your attention back to the present moment. These moments begin to grow. The mind becomes less dependent on constant stimulation. It no longer reacts immediately to every impulse. You begin to feel more comfortable in stillness because it is no longer unfamiliar. There is also a clarity that comes with this practice. When the mind is not overloaded with input, it can process thoughts more clearly. You are able to see things as they are, without the confusion created by constant distraction. This clarity brings a sense of stability because your attention is not scattered. It is important to understand that settling the mind is not about forcing silence. It is about allowing the natural movement of the mind to slow down on its own. When you stop adding more to it, it begins to return to a quieter state. A mind that is constantly distracted becomes restless and dependent, but a mind that learns to settle becomes steady and self-sufficient. It does not need constant input to feel complete. It can rest within itself. Letting your mind settle without distraction is about creating space for stillness to appear. It is about allowing yourself to be present without needing to escape the moment. And as this becomes more natural, you begin to experience something deeper, a quiet sense of peace that does not come from activity or connection, but from the simple ability to be with your own mind just as it is. In that stillness, loneliness begins to dissolve because the space that once felt empty is no longer something you need to fill. It becomes something you can rest within, calmly and completely. Lesson 5. Reduce emotional dependency. Emotional dependency is often subtle. It does not always appear as a clear need for someone, but as a quiet reliance on others to feel stable, valued, or complete. When this pattern is present, your inner state begins to depend on how others respond to you. Their attention brings comfort, their absence creates unease, and their behavior begins to shape how you feel within yourself. In Buddhism, suffering often arises when the mind attaches itself to what is uncertain and constantly changing. The emotions you receive from others, their affection, approval, presence, or understanding are not fixed. They shift based on circumstances, moods, and their own inner states. When your peace depends on these shifting conditions, your mind becomes unstable. This is why emotional dependency leads to a sense of loneliness, even when you are not physically alone. You may be surrounded by people, but if your inner state is tied to their presence or validation, the moment that connection weakens, the feeling of emptiness appears. It is not the absence of people that creates the discomfort, but the dependence on them to feel complete. Reducing emotional dependency does not mean becoming distant or disconnected. It means understanding that your inner stability cannot be built on something outside your control. You begin to see that while relationships are valuable, they are not meant to carry the weight of your entire emotional state. The shift begins with awareness. Notice how your emotions change based on others. Notice the moments when you feel uplifted because of someone's attention, and the moments when you feel unsettled because of their absence or response. Instead of immediately reacting to these changes, observe them. See how the mind is attaching itself to something external. As you observe, you begin to create space. You no longer follow every emotional reaction automatically. When a feeling arises because of someone else, you recognize it as a temporary state, not as something that defines you. This reduces the intensity of the experience because you are no longer fully identified with it. There is also an important shift in how you relate to yourself. Instead of looking outward to feel valued or understood, you begin to develop that understanding within. You become more present with your own thoughts and emotions. You listen to yourself without needing constant confirmation from others. This creates a sense of internal support that reduces the need for external validation. This builds a deeper form of stability. Your emotions become less reactive because they are not constantly being influenced by others. You are still able to connect, care, and relate, but your sense of peace does not depend entirely on those connections. You remain balanced, even when external conditions change. This can be practiced by noticing when you are seeking emotional reassurance. When you feel the urge to rely on someone to change your inner state, pause for a moment. Instead of immediately reaching outward, turn your attention inward. Sit with the feeling and allow it to exist without trying to fix it through external means. This may feel unfamiliar at first, because the mind is used to resolving discomfort through connection. But as you stay with the feeling, you begin to see that it changes on its own. It rises, stays, and then softens. This shows that your inner state is not completely dependent on others. It has its own natural movement. It is also important to understand that reducing emotional dependency does not remove the value of relationships. It actually improves them. When you are not relying on others to feel complete, your connections become more balanced. You are able to engage without pressure, without expectation, and without the need to hold on tightly. A mind that is emotionally dependent feels unstable because it is always reacting to something outside itself. But a mind that learns to remain steady within its own experience becomes calm and grounded. It does not lose its balance easily because it is not relying on conditions that constantly change. Reducing emotional dependency is about returning to yourself. It is about recognizing that your inner stability can exist without constant external support. As this understanding deepens, the need to depend on others begins to fade. You begin to feel something different, not emptiness, but quiet strength. A sense that you can be with yourself fully, without needing something outside to complete the moment. And when that stability becomes natural, being alone no longer feels heavy. It feels steady, clear, and peaceful because your sense of connection is no longer dependent on what is around you, but rooted in how you relate to yourself. Lesson 6. Find comfort in your own rhythm. Much of the discomfort you feel when you are alone comes from a quiet pressure to match the pace, expectations, and patterns of the world around you. The mind becomes used to comparing how others spend their time, how quickly they move, how they live and connect. Without noticing it, you begin to measure your own way of living against these external rhythms. When your pace does not match, a subtle unease appears. In Buddhism, peace is not found by adjusting yourself to everything outside you. It is found by understanding the nature of your own mind and allowing it to move in a balanced way. Each person has a natural rhythm, a way of thinking, acting, and experiencing that does not need to be forced or constantly adjusted to fit external patterns. But when you are disconnected from this rhythm, you begin to feel out of place, even in simple moments. When you are alone, this becomes more noticeable. Without the structure created by others, you are left with your own time, your own pace, and your own presence. If you are not familiar with this, the mind begins to feel unsettled. It searches for something to align with, something to guide it. In that search, it often creates restlessness because it is not yet comfortable with simply being as it is. Finding comfort in your own rhythm means allowing yourself to move through time without constant comparison. It means recognizing that your way of thinking, resting, and acting does not need to match anyone else's. This does not remove discipline or direction, it removes unnecessary pressure. This may feel unfamiliar. The mind is used to external structure, so when that structure is not present, it may feel uncertain. You may feel the urge to fill every moment, to stay busy, or to follow patterns that do not truly feel natural to you. But if you pause and observe, you begin to notice your own pace more clearly. You notice when your mind feels naturally focused and when it needs rest. You notice how your energy shifts throughout the day. You begin to see that there is a rhythm already present, one that does not need to be forced. By paying attention to this, you start to move in a way that feels more balanced and less strained. This does not mean acting only based on comfort. It means understanding your natural flow and working with it, rather than constantly pushing against it. When you align with your own rhythm, your actions become more steady. You are not rushing unnecessarily, and you are not delaying without reason. You move with clarity instead of pressure. There is also a sense of ease that develops. When you are not comparing your pace to others, you remove a source of tension. You are no longer asking whether you are doing enough or moving fast enough. You are simply present with your own process. This reduces mental noise and allows your mind to settle more easily. This can be practiced by creating space to observe yourself without judgment. Notice how you naturally move through tasks, how your attention shifts, and how your energy rises and falls. Instead of forcing yourself into patterns that feel unnatural, begin to adjust in a way that supports steadiness and clarity. This creates a deeper sense of familiarity with yourself. You are no longer trying to match external expectations at every moment. You begin to trust your own timing. This trust reduces restlessness because the mind no longer feels the need to constantly search for direction outside itself. It is important to understand that your rhythm may not always be perfect. There will be moments of imbalance, moments where you feel rushed or slowed down. But instead of reacting to these moments, you return to awareness. You adjust gently, without creating additional pressure. A mind that is constantly comparing itself to others becomes unsettled, but a mind that understands its own rhythm becomes stable. It moves with a sense of continuity rather than being pulled in different directions. Finding comfort in your own rhythm is about returning to yourself. It is about recognizing that you do not need to follow every external pattern to feel at ease. Your stability does not come from matching the world, it comes from understanding how you move within it. And as this understanding deepens, being alone begins to feel different. It is no longer a space where you feel lost or uncertain. It becomes a space where you can move freely, without comparison, without pressure, and without the need to be anywhere else. And in that freedom, your mind becomes calm, your presence becomes steady, and your experience of solitude becomes something that feels natural and complete. Lesson 7. See solitude as a form of freedom. Solitude is something to avoid. It is often seen as a sign of absence, a space where something is missing. The mind associates it with disconnection, and because of this, it tries to escape it. It fills time with noise, activity, and constant engagement, believing that being surrounded is the only way to feel complete. But in Buddhism, solitude is not viewed as a loss, it is seen as an opportunity, not an emptiness to fear, but a space where the mind can return to itself without interruption. When you begin to understand solitude in this way, its meaning changes completely. What once felt heavy begins to feel open. The discomfort you feel in solitude does not come from being alone itself. It comes from the mind's resistance to stillness. When there are no external distractions, the mind is left with its own activity. Thoughts become more noticeable, emotions become clearer, and the habit of constant stimulation is no longer available. This can feel unfamiliar at first, but it is also where awareness begins to deepen. When you stop resisting solitude, you begin to see what it actually offers. It gives you space to observe your thoughts without interruption, space to understand your emotions without being influenced by others, and space to experience your own presence more clearly. This space is not empty, it is full of awareness. Freedom begins to appear when you are no longer dependent on constant connection to feel stable. When your sense of peace does not rely on who is around you, you are no longer limited by external conditions. You can be in any environment, with or without others, and still remain steady. This is a different kind of independence, one that comes from within. Solitude also removes many of the pressures that come from external interaction. You are not adjusting your behavior to match expectations. You are not responding to constant input. You are simply present, without needing to perform or react. This allows your mind to rest in a way that is not always possible in busy environments. This freedom may feel unfamiliar. The mind may still look for something to hold on to, something to engage with. It may create thoughts that pull you away from the moment. But if you remain with the experience, without following those thoughts, the restlessness begins to soften. What remains is a quieter, more stable awareness. There is also a deeper understanding that develops in solitude. When you are not constantly influenced by others, you begin to see your own patterns more clearly. You understand how your mind moves, what it holds on to, and what it tries to avoid. This awareness allows you to respond more intentionally, because you are no longer acting without understanding. This can be practiced by allowing moments of solitude without trying to escape them. Instead of immediately seeking distraction, remain with the experience. Notice what arises, but do not attach to it. Let the moment unfold without adding meaning to it. Solitude becomes less of something you endure and more of something you appreciate. It becomes a space where your mind can settle, where your thoughts become clearer, and where your awareness becomes stronger. The need to constantly be connected begins to fade because you are no longer dependent on it. It is important to understand that seeing solitude as freedom does not mean rejecting connection with others. It means that your connection with yourself is strong enough that you are not limited by whether others are present or not. You can engage with others fully, but you do not lose your sense of stability when you are alone. A mind that fears solitude will always feel restless when it is not surrounded, but a mind that understands solitude becomes free. It is not confined by the need for constant interaction. It is not disturbed by the absence of others. It rests within itself, calmly and steadily. Solitude is not something that takes away from you. It is something that reveals what is already there. When you allow it, it shows you that your sense of peace does not depend on external conditions. It exists within your own awareness. And, when this becomes clear, solitude is no longer something to avoid. It becomes a space of freedom, where your mind is not pulled in every direction, where your presence is complete, and where peace is no longer something you search for. It is something you experience, quietly and naturally, within yourself. Learning to be alone is not about removing people from your life. It is about removing the dependence that makes their absence feel heavy. When you begin to understand your own mind, sit with your own presence, and move without the constant need for distraction, something begins to settle within you. You no longer feel the urge to escape quiet moments because those moments stop feeling empty. Instead, they become a space where your mind can rest, where your thoughts slow down, and where a quiet sense of stability begins to grow. Connection becomes different. You are no longer seeking others to complete you, but choosing them from a place of wholeness. Because when you are at ease within yourself, being alone is no longer a burden. It becomes a form of peace that stays with you wherever you go.